doors and looks may bring. You are better than all these things. Your love is better than life. You are the well that won't run dry. I have tasted and I have seen. You are better than all these things.
John 8, chapter 8, verses 2 through 11. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to her, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on do not sin again." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Thanks, Brett. And thank you, Olivia. When it comes to sex and sexual ethics, the church has had a lot to say on this topic throughout the years. The church is not shy about, just in general, hasn't been shy over multiple decades about talking about sex. And they've said a lot about it that is wrong at times. Much of it, though, has done real harm. And yet, as a society, when it comes to sex and sexual ethics, society, we've become more and more post-Christian, right? And the church grows more and more inconsequential and not relevant to people's lives over time. And still, with all the harm that the church has done, it's not also like suddenly, without the church, people are finding their way into life-giving, healthy, joyful intimacy around sex either. So the church has not done it right at all, but people are more lonely than ever, more unable to connect than ever, more unsure of their bodies than ever. So none of us have gotten it right. And that's why more than ever, I think this is why general category of questions I've received across the last 3 years of this series, from 2022, when I received them then, to 2025. I've received more questions that either loosely or directly have to do with sex than any other topic. And I thought maybe I would address them individually, but none of them seemed worthy of a full sermon in themselves until this year somebody finally asked the question, just the general question: what does the Bible say about sex and what am I to believe? And that then got me thinking about all the other slew of questions that we had in previous years. My thing just shut down. Let me open it again. Why does it just turn off? Hold on, I got it right here. It's gonna be here. I started thinking of all the other slew of questions too, right? So all the other questions you asked in the other years before, and so I figured we need to do this sermon now today. It is now time to talk about sex. So with that in mind, there we go. We are back. The questions that I got asked generally were from Gen X and millennials. And so when you all word questions, you word them from a perspective of deconstruction. You all were beneficiaries of culture wars and purity culture and all kinds of various theologies in the 80s and 90s. And so you bring this question forward around how do I deconstruct what I believed before about sexuality? Or how can you please give perspective on premarital sex? Or can you please give perspective on women and their role in the church and all of that? But I have to acknowledge, the people for whom this question really matters, they don't have deconstruction to do. They're the Gen Z and Generation Alpha, the ones that are coming up right now. We have a couple of them in our midst. The ones who really this question is for, they're not going to ask it that way. They don't care what the Bible says about sex, A. They've never asked what the Bible said. And they also don't care about the history of harm that has been done in the church. They don't know of it. What they want to know, what they really, really want to know is, I got this thing. It's called sexuality. I know it's alive in my body. I've felt it. How in the world does that have to do with my faith? How do I live as a sexual person and also be faithful? Like, they want me to give today a framework for living in the world. And y'all don't really want that, the others of you. I know, you want me to deconstruct it all, but I'm going to do a bit of both, okay? So I'm going to start with the deconstruction. You asked for it. What does the Bible actually say about sex? And how has that distortion of faithful sexuality impacted what we believe and internalize about all kinds of things? And so here's the things that it impacts. Sex impacts what we believe about singleness and dating, what we believe about premarital sex, who we ought to marry, the role of women, the role of marriage, what's expected in marriage, what we think about gender and expression and orientation and attraction, and then also the whole category of body image and size, ability and disability. It impacts all of these things. And all of you asked a million questions about this list right here. And there's no way in a 30-minute sermon I can address this. Like, no way at all I could address all these points. The point is not to address all of these, it's to say that what we believe about these and more has been largely determined by what's been constructed for us about sexuality. And that now, in adulthood, we're now trying to wrestle and deconstruct all of this ourselves and for our kids, and to teach them in ways that maybe we weren't taught when we were grown up. And so your Gen X and your millennial questions will be heard and held. And then we're also going to hold today the questions that our questions that our Gen Zs have. Like, how do I navigate this world of sex? A world of sex that is majority online now. How do I navigate this world of dating? A world of dating that's majority online now in a faithful way. Like, does it even have anything to do with my faith? Do I compartmentalize these two things? What does God want from me? And so we'll get to that in a few minutes, because we have to get to that. But today I'd like to try at least to say something healthy and useful about sex and continue to give some permission to the healthy and useful conversations of sex that should be happening in our households, should be happening with our friends in the church. We should. And so we began today with the story that Olivia read. The woman caught in the act of adultery. There are so many scriptures in the Bible that talk about some way or another sex. And you may be thinking, this one really isn't even one of them. I intentionally today did not choose a scripture that tries to make an ethical statement about sex or gives a prescription about it, or a list of spiritual goods, this often happens, a list of spiritual goods that precede a list of indulgences to avoid. There's many of those in Scripture. You can find them. We've read them before here at Kingstowne. There's these, but I think they have taken up a lot more space than they were meant to take up in the conversation of sex. And depending on where and when they were written, they say all kinds of different things. Some of them conflict one another and have been largely yanked out of context, especially for a early Christianity time frame, and that where people cannot even imagine so much of the world we live in now, right? I think these few scriptures have been made to do so much more of the work on this than they were ever meant to do. And so instead, Olivia has placed before us a story from the life of Jesus, when Jesus was confronted with some no's about sex. And I think it may just start to actually point us to some yeses also. Before we get to that, let's talk about all that's in the background. When it comes to sex, it seems we have often led with what we think about other people's problems, right? When it comes to sex, it seems we have often led with other people's things, not our own stuff. And throughout many centuries of church history, when leading and writing about sex, men, who were the predominant people, all of the people talking about it, men who have had power to speak about it in public, have done so by pointing fingers at women and pointing fingers at queer people. Early biblical people did it. People that have written all the way through the purity cultures, most of whom have done this. Early on, it's like there was this gigantic no, like stamped on this story. Our stories in general, this story behind is the story of the adulterous woman, but it's like this gigantic no was stamped on the sexuality of women, whether it be women who seduce men, or women who aren't virgins when they should be, or women who want sex too much, or women who want sex too little. In this passage of the woman caught in adultery, it's women who have been the focus of sexual problems and taboos, even though men have had a lot of agency and power around it. And when women haven't been shamed for it, so I have to acknowledge this, when women haven't been shamed or scapegoated, queer people have been, right? People whose sexual identities and desires don't fit the heteronormative grid have served as a convenient scapegoat in many times and many places, resulting in the stigmatization of both queer people and gay sex, and again, also women. I will say we can also intersect that. Black women have received a different level of that heaping. Queer women have received a different level of that heaping. Women who have been shamed around if you are a woman here who's been shamed around your sexuality or sexual history maybe, like I'm just one person in front of a church, one person, but I feel like we have to begin with saying I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Women who have been shamed for merely just being in the body of a woman and know the pain of that even. I'm sorry. You deserve so much more honor and love and respect than that. And also, my LGBTQ friends, I know you all are uniquely attuned to the long and deep history of shame and exclusion, which continues in so many places today too. So for that, I am so sorry. You deserve much more honor and respect and love than that. All of us, our bodies, our sexuality, our sexual history or lack thereof, this is really sensitive stuff. It's super tender territory, I know that. And so that deserves care first off. But in our story today, we see an utter lack of all of that, of respect or honor or care around someone else's sexual indiscretion. And they engage religion as a weapon against someone else's sexuality. Imagine for a second the experience of this woman, dragged out of bed in the wee hours of the morning after some neighbor had reported the affair she's been having, right? Or perhaps not even that. Perhaps dragged out after being sexually manipulated or even assaulted. It was rampant during this time period. Maybe this happened just the night before. This unnamed woman did not have sex by herself, right? You cannot commit adultery alone. And yet it's just her that is dragged into the temple to face shame and await punishment, again, as if the transgressions or troubles of one woman is that community's biggest sexual problem. The irony of this is that the biggest sexual problems in that community were likely the same ones that are the biggest sexual problems for us today, right? They, like us, would have had problems with the interplay of sex and violence, right? How many millions of people have been raped, sexually abused, sexually assaulted? Sexual violence is at the top of humanity's sexual problems. It was then, it is now. You'll find that there are victims then, victims now. And then part of it, and adjacent to sexual violence, you have sex that is tied to the abuse of power, or inside and outside of religion, sexual harassment, sexual coercion, cover-ups of all kinds related to that. It's only begun to bubble out into the news, a lot of it. And then on a more mundane level, so if those are some of our sexual problems, they had them, we had them. On a mundane level, both then and now, so much other, like meaningless sex that has happened over decades and centuries has making us over time less and less and less integrated as people, less and less connected to one another, less and less feeling of whole, more and more sense of just complete unknowing of if my body is worthy, if I'm made in the image of the Creator who called me good ever. Untender sex, anonymous sex, sex used to satisfy one person at the expense of another, sexuality that does not bring us close to one another, does not make us more joyful with one another, does not lead us into or come out of intimate relationship with one another. All these things are the same sins that were then and now. That's why you asked. That's why I know you asked. You don't ask this a million times in various different ways or have so many questions about body or gender or role of women or what you are to do in your sex life if you don't have these questions, unless you are very much aware that communities very much need to have conversations about these problems. And yet these are not the conversations that most faith communities have been having about sex, right? Not then or now. It's interesting to me that in this moment with Jesus, of the woman caught in adultery and the judging crowd there, some translators and traditions have said that when Jesus bends down, he bends down to the ground. When he bends down to the ground to write something or to draw something in the sand, some have said he actually starts writing the sins of every person in the crowd, making their own sins, sexual and otherwise, in the dirt, while daring them to continue in their judgment of her. Now, for various reasons, I don't think Jesus would have done this. I don't think this is actually what happened. But can you imagine? Can you imagine if Jesus had done that? Jesus had knelt down and wrote, whoever you are. I'm not going to look at any of y'all in particular because then you're going to think I'm saying this about you. Like you, random chair. You who rush through sex with your wife without giving her pleasure. You cast the first stone, right? Can you imagine like him turning to another person in the room, in who glare at your employees' bodies all the time, make unwelcome, semi-sexual statements? You go cast the first stone. You who are so disconnected from who you are, what you want. You've been broken by relationships over time. You false report and point the finger, making it 10 times harder for the next legitimate victim to come forward. You cast the first stone. What I'm saying here is there's a lot more to talk about than a single woman's sexual choices that she bitterly regrets, right? Sexual violence, sex without consent, untender, unintimate sex that doesn't foster connection, intimacy, love. These are all the things that very much call for our attention. But again, it's interesting to me that Jesus didn't just move his community from one no to another no. I think Jesus took the no in this moment, that neither this woman nor anyone else should commit adultery. Jesus affirmed that, but then he also pivoted to the yes that needed to be affirmed. So I think these are some of the yeses we see in this text in John 8. Jesus says no to the woman's adultery. He tells her privately, gently, listen, go and sin no more. But there's other no's. And so Jesus says yes. Jesus won't have their no's. Jesus, in our time frame, this would have been called slut shaming, right? Like, Jesus will not have it. Jesus is not okay with that. This community also is saying no to this woman's life and freedom and hopeful future. They judge her, they condemn her, they would stone her if they could. But Jesus now and then now, in this time period and then, is convinced that none of us should be defined by our worst act, that we all deserve grace. And so Jesus says yes to universal accountability. We all could use better health and wholeness in our sexuality. Jesus invites the whole community of John 8, and by extension, all of us here, to focus our attention on not judging others, but doing our work on our own sexuality along with the rest of our lives to be healthy, constructive people. Jesus says yes to radical grace. Neither do I condemn you. I don't condemn you, but he also says sin no more. Regardless of your sexual history, whatever it is, regardless of the condemnation that you have faced in your own eyes, perhaps, because of all that you've internalized, or in anyone else's eyes, you are not condemned. And then I think Jesus also says yes as well to freedom. Go on your own way. Go on your own way now. And from now on, don't sin. Do no harm. Don't give up your dignity. Don't tether your sexuality to people you'll regret. We will fill in more don'ts here. But to me, the most powerful words are again, not the no, but the yes that Jesus gives. Yes to freedom, yes to possibility of healing, yes to joy, yes to love. Thinking about what God's yes to our sexuality might be makes me ask, when it comes to the church, the good news of Jesus and our sexuality, how do we sex positive our message and experience here? I know you don't hear sex positive said much in church. How do we move from the secrecy of it, the shame of it, the judgment of it, toward honesty and freedom and health? I know it might sound funny for some of us to hear that term sex positive in church, let alone in a sermon, but I wonder if you know that the Bible actually has a whole book full of erotic poetry. Did you know that? Have you ever looked at it? People are going to be like reading their Bible under the sheets now. Right at the end of the Bible's ancient wisdom literature, just before the prophets begin, is the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. It's this very old Hebrew poetry, so the imagery is kind of weird to most of us, but see what you did there. Like it's also very obvious what they're talking about, right? It's like I don't understand. That's your language. I don't get it. But also entendre, right? More tactile and abstract than visual. But once you get into it, it's pretty spicy. It's super spicy. And I don't say this to shock or titillate. It just as the editors who pulled the Bible together in the first place didn't include it to shock and titillate. But I do think it does something for us. I think it's the place in all that we have, with all of the set of, live faithfully, don't do all this that we have around sex. It's this one space in the Bible that affirms sexuality. It obviously affirms it. You can't get away from it. It affirms sex and sexuality as powerful and as beautiful. Our sexuality is not a problem to overcome, but a gift to receive in gratitude. And so Song of Songs affirms the utter delight that sex can be, the swooning over another's body inside and out, the ecstasy in our own minds and our bodies as we fall in love and we live out loving relationships with each other. Song of Songs and Song of Solomon, it affirms the power of sex, how it literally has a power over our lives, and can be really great, that it is among the greatest forces that we experience. Sex can be this powerful motivator for us, this beautiful bonding agent between people, between the wrong people, though. It can be practiced in wrong ways, and it can do powerful harm in the world. Song of Songs compares sex to all the beauty of nature in its delight, to fire in its intensity, to death in its strength. Maybe we'll just, I'm gonna read a little bit of it, and then I'll let you do your own stuff. How beautiful are you, my love? How very beautiful your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Moving down the slopes, these are new things you can say to one another, apparently. Moving down the slopes of Gilead, your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from the washing. Let's move to the next one. Well, you'll start getting a little bit of the, your lips are like crimson thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David. Of course it is. On it hang 1,000 bucklers, all of them shielded warriors, okay. And 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. And then just the top of the first one, and I'm not gonna read the rest of it. Top of the next one is your channel is an orchard of pomegranates, so I'm gonna leave it there. You cannot say this is anything but erotic, and it's in the Bible, right? And Song of Songs, in its Jewish and Christian interpretive tradition over the centuries, has linked our sexuality also with our spirituality. Because the longing and the ecstasy and the delight we experience are adjacent to the longings, the ecstasy, the delights that call us to long for God. Friends, we could do well to ask ourselves today, have I believed my sexuality to be a problem to overcome? And how can I welcome it as a gift instead? We could do well if we are partnered to ask, how can I experience more delight and play and intimacy and fire? This is not a how-to sermon, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to tell you how to do that. But for some of us, this means practicing more emotional intimacy with our partner, since vulnerable hearts make vulnerable bodies easier, right? For some of this means becoming open again to our own pleasure and delight. Maybe we forgot about it. Maybe just life got really strange. When you live in your sweats every single day for like 4 years, it changes the way you see your body, right? Maybe you haven't been encouraged lately to value what's underneath. And for some of us, this also might mean putting energy and thought into the care of your partner's safety or joy or delight, if you've not been particularly creative or thoughtful about that. You'll notice, though, that I haven't talked about marriage at all yet. I mean, I'm just saying partner. I'm not saying spouse. I'm saying partner. Even though Christian teaching about sex has often boiled down to don't have sex if you're not married, right? And if you are married, don't have sex with anyone else, but make sure you do it within your marriage, right? That's kind of been the general message. Do what you want, or sometimes do what you must do. Churches have had this very limited conversation. This is the conversation churches have dealt with. And when I was growing up as a teenager, I went to a Pentecostal church, 90s culture wars, and purity culture, and this conversation got especially intense for a while, specifically around a book that came out, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and around a particular branding. It was just like consumerism for Christians. It was just so we could all just go buy a bunch of things that said this on it, I think. But if you are in your 20s or 20s to 40s, maybe late 20s to 40s, and you grew up in the Christian movement of any kind, there's especially Protestant, there's a decent chance that you were exposed to this purity movement, and that involved a true love waits, and you put a ring on your finger that your dad wrote you a letter and gave it to you. It's very strange, to save it for marriage. And it was this, and this purity movement basically revolved around 2 main thoughts. 2 things to say about sex. Only 2 things, just 2. If you're not married, don't. If you're married, go for it. And it was that was the whole thing. So a lot of 18-year-olds started getting married really fast, right? It's pretty clear now, though, that these 2 sexual ethics did way more harm than good. All of the statistics show this now. On average, abstinence-only education managed to get people to delay sexual activity by a couple of years, not usually until marriage, by the way, and actually made it far more likely that young people's early sexual experiences would be way less safe, leading to more unwanted pregnancies and more abortions during that time period than has followed since an awakening of it. And as with most Christian teaching on sex in the past, the purity movement's obsession with virginity and its shaming of people to try to get them to be so-called sexually pure, it was mandated for both girls and boys, but the fixation really was on girls. It was on girls, and the cult of female virginity and this fear and shaming of girls and on women did a lot of damage to the faith and sexuality and like spiritual lives of girls and women. And so if this is your experience, this was my experience, obviously, like you can tell I get emotional. I'm so sorry for that. I wonder if instead of the gigantic no's of the purity movement, we could tenderly hold and together 4 yeses. And I know that I gave you the 3 that Jesus had for John 8, but I want to give us 4 yeses for faithful sexuality, okay? 1, covenant and commitment. Yes to that. Yes to covenant, yes to commitment. Good sex is a powerful bonding agent between 2 people. And the safest, most delightful sex occurs between people who are emotionally and relationally intimate and who have made commitments to not maybe be emotionally and relationally intimate with others, right? Who have said, I like you that much. I care about you that much. Marriage is a great way to do this. It's not the only way to do this. We live in a time when over half of adults, at least around here, over half, are not married. And when people's marriages often take place 20 years or more after puberty, that's a long time. That's a long time. Somewhat unprecedented compared to other cultures, like biblical culture. Girls were being married off at 13. 20 years past puberty, a whole different conversation. And keeping conversations about marriage on the table still makes sense to me, though it's one of the ways we show each other a commitment and covenant. That's the first yes. Second, yes. Yes to discernment, which means figuring things out in a complicated world rather than just pointing to black and white rules, right? There are no black and white rules here. Christianity, compared to most religions, and frankly compared to most secular ways of life, actually, is not if it's not supposed to be, but it has been, it's not actually very rule-based. Our theology isn't. Jesus and his most significant early followers and interpreters encouraged a law of love, to love God, to love neighbor, and to love yourself profoundly. And within that law, there was a fair bit of freedom. That's the Christianity that I know. So when it comes to our sexual ethics and relationships, we need to encourage all of us to first ask, how do I love God with my body and sexuality? And then, how do I love my neighbor, including any current or future sexual partners or friends or children? How do I love my neighbor? And lastly, how do I love and honor myself? If we're carefully and seriously asking these questions, we'll take care of all the baselines, right? All the baselines when it comes to sexuality, consent, safety, kindness, love, tenderness, and beyond that, we'll likely do all right. We'll do all right. So yes to covenant and commitment, yes to discernment, yes to singleness. Number 3, yes to singleness. For some of us, old school word, chastity. Yes to it. Yes to that. Jesus, the New Testament, and the early church all honored singleness and its potential for freedom and devotion to God above marriage. All of the New Testament authors would say that you would have more freedom and connection to God. Why priests have been unmarried? Freedom. You'd have more freedom and connection to God being single. Somehow it became the Christian thing to do is to get married, right? We would do justice to the growing single community in our DC metro area to talk about that more. Singleness is not a problem to be overcome. Jesus in the early church also honored and respected people who, while single, embraced chastity. If you're doing that, great, good for you. Abstaining from sex during a season, or devoting your love and energy and body to love of God or love of neighbor is a beautiful path forward. We don't talk about that part in the Bible nearly enough. But it's not the mandated path forward. It never was. This isn't for everyone. In our society, church included, you get more scrutiny and exclusion and not honor, though, for being single. And if you're abstinent, either for life or for a season, you get talked about. Like you're immature, or there's something wrong with you. Like I say shame on that, right? I'm not telling anyone you need to be single or abstinent or I'm not giving you permission to go have sex either. But if you are, good for you. I hope you can receive and find the honor and gift in that, right? So yes to commitment, yes to discernment, yes to singleness, and yes to sensuality. As the band comes forward, especially for those of us who are single, and especially for those of us who are single during the pandemic, who were single during the pandemic and know what it's like to crave people, to crave touch, to crave intimacy, yes to sensuality, right? I already talked about sex and spirituality, about longing and delight and pleasure, how central all these things are in life, but we could broaden this talk about sensuality and how it's in a virtual world, how non-existent it's become. Many of life's deepest and most transcendent experiences are really bodily ones, right? The pleasure is not just sex, but the delicious taste of food. We only taste it better when we don't have a fork in one hand and a phone in the other, right? Embracing the feel of cold air and water and the comfort of those same and the warmth of a fire, the delight in singing, the delight in dancing, for some of us, exercise, making things with our hands, we were made for all of this. And it is a part of who we are as embodied people. And so if you've not been hugging or touching anyone lately, let alone, sexually active, but if you need more of that, says, yeah, all of us need more of that. You need sensuality in your life. It is a basic need for every person. And so here's my prayer for you. I pray for you as sexual beings. You've never heard me say that before. I'll probably never do it again. Take it now. I pray for responsibility, kindness, love, grace, freedom from shame. But most of all, I pray for connection for you, that whatever you are doing, however you embody it, however you take the fire and add it back in, that it be something that really truly grounds you and connects you. May you be blessed to know that no one condemns you in it, right? And may you have a freedom to go on your way and love and delight and joy to sin no more, right? Go on your way and sin no more. Let's pray.